All right, we're back. We are COMP397, and it is the fall of 2017 semester here at Centennial, and we are week 2, part 2 of our broadcast. We just finished talking about the pitch and the game design document, and now we're going to be starting back into our code. I'm working with a code base up on GitHub. For those people who did not come in last week or couldn't make it in, please look at the GitHub, my GitHub link, which is you go to github.com/Centennial College. That is my GitHub. Does anyone who came in new not know about GitHub? Because there's a bit of a learning curve. So I know one of you does, right? But yeah, you. But the rest of the guys in the back may not have a GitHub account. Do you have a GitHub account? Yeah. How about you guys? Yes? Yes? GitHub account? Good. So all you need to do is go to this GitHub link right here. Unless you have Slack, I could have put it on there, but it's there. Go to that GitHub link. It might also be on Centennial. I can't remember if I put it up there. And download. Please download the project template from last week, which is COMP397-F2017-project-template. All right, so that's what it is right here. And notice that I have 4 commits, right? This is my demo project. I'm going to modify this today so you guys can automatically transpile your TypeScript, right, to JavaScript. I'm going to do that today. And the other thing I want to try and do today is, by the way, for those people who missed last week, you need to have a bunch of stuff installed. You may want to just watch. I don't know how fast you are doing this, but you need TypeScript. You need Node.js installed on the system in front of you if you have your own computer. Install Node.js if you don't have it already, and you have to install TypeScript. So if you have to go to TypeScriptLang.org, if you go to TypeScriptLang.org. And there is instructions on how to install TypeScript. And here it is right here, npm install -g TypeScript. And if you don't do that, then whenever we transpile or anything, you won't be able to do it. So that's kind of the things you can do. Please don't use Visual Studio. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code. That's what I'm going to be using. So that's the main thing to use. You could also use Visual Studio 2017 and 2015. I just won't be using those. And of course, there's other editors that you could use. Atom is a pretty good one as well. I don't recommend Eclipse. WebStorm is also really, really good, but I'm going to be focusing on Visual Studio Code. Okay? So, just as a review, remember what TypeScript was last week for everybody, right? Last week, we talked about this idea of a playground where we take TypeScript. Here's the person class. And for those people who weren't here last week, here's a good primer and reminder of what it was. For people who were here, I have a person class. This is what maybe a person class would look like. And if you know object-oriented programming, then something like this might be familiar to you, or you can figure out what it does, right? So on the left-hand side, this is TypeScript. On the right-hand side is the transpiled JavaScript version, right? Moving from TypeScript to JavaScript. That's what this thing is, okay? So this is good. And what this thing does, what this whole thing is about making our lives easier. We already have a challenge as it is because we're writing everything from scratch. And remember that we're also using this suite of libraries called CreateJS, right? CreateJS is the suite of libraries we're using. There's 4 libraries, right? Easel.js is the one that deals with the canvas. Tween.js allows us to do a little bit of animation and locomotion, right? Smooth pathing and so on. Sound.js allows us to make sounds in the browser. And Preload.js allows us to preload our images and sounds in order for us to have an easier time when it comes to, and a more efficient, less draw calls and that kind of stuff when it comes to doing stuff, right? So great little library set. It comes from Grant Skinner, who originally worked with Adobe. And when they did their Flash, he worked with ActionScript and all that kind of stuff. He was one of the developers of ActionScript. And then eventually he created CreateJS as Flash was going out the window as an alternate to Flash that works cross-browser, which is really cool. So that means if you know ActionScript, or if you've ever done ActionScript, then CreateJS is your friend. It works very similar to that in terms of syntax. And we'll talk about that. And so the other thing we did last week when it came to our Visual Studio Code is I put together a little template for you, right? And we have this idea of a task runner that I'm going to talk about today, right? This is a task runner. that's inside VS Code. I'm going to change this task runner, and unfortunately they don't provide it anymore. But there is a task runner that I had from previous projects that I'm going to just give you, all right, just to make your lives easier. So I'm going to go up on the Centennial College repo, and I have past iterations of my code up on the repo, and I'm going to look for COMP397, right? And if I look at any of them, like this one from July of 2016, or maybe August of 2016, let's look at that one. And then there should be a, maybe there's not. I do apologize. I'm trying to find one that has the right stuff. Oh, that's not it. Oh, no, it is. VS Code. That's what I'm looking for right here. So I'm going to grab this little code here, and I'm going to put it up on your link for you. So I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to replace the task runner here with this one. This is it right here. What's this say? It says it's deprecated, probably is background instead. So is background. Is background. Oops. Background. Here we go. All right, so this is the problem watcher. This is what it looks like, and this is going to be in task.json. I'm going to share it with you. So I'm going to go up on GitHub here, and what I'm going to do here is I have tasks. These are the three things I've changed. So I'm going to say updated task runner, right? I'm going to put this up on, so before people who are, so I want to stage all these changes, and I want to go up on GitHub and push these changes. So if you look at GitHub now, please look at GitHub now, and if you look at it in the Centennial College repo or the account, the first project should be COMP397 F2017 project template. And inside there should be a VS Code folder if you want to modify yours, and just add a tasks.json. That task.json file is going to be there. This one it is, right? So for those people who weren't here last week, please just download this entire repo. So go to Centennial College, get this project template, and go click here where it says clone or download, and then just download the zip file and run it from there. Now remember, this assumes that you have Node.js running. You have Node.js installed on your laptop or on the machine in front of you. And it also assumes that you have TypeScript installed within Node.js. You've installed TypeScript like we showed you. All right? For those people who were here last week, please just update your task runner. Okay? So what do I mean by update your task runner? That means modify the file that says in the folder under VS Code, the .vs Code folder, there's a task.json file. Just change it to the one you see up here, which is the one I put up on GitHub. Why? Because what this does is when I press Command-Shift-B, right? Command-Shift-B or Control-Shift-B if you're a Windows machine. Watch if I do this. Control-Shift-B. What it does is it automatically transpiles, right? But now my task runner is functioning. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look. So here's on my scripts, in my core folder, in my game.ts, I have my little game.ts folder, right? And I want to run this thing so it runs automatically in the browser. So the other thing we did last week is we also installed a little npm module called light-server. So if I bring up my my terminal or command prompt, what we did last week, and again, there's a little bit of catching up to do for you guys, but if you look at the project template, here's the project template on my desktop. I'm going to go cd, so cd, well, space, and this is, by the way, it works with Windows and Mac. Cd space, I'm going to drag my project template from my desktop to my command prompt and press, or terminal, and press enter. And then I'm in there. I've navigated there, right? Cool. So now it's CLS for clear on Windows machines and clear for Mac, right? If I do a listing -al for Mac, or on Windows it's dir/a, right? Let's do an ls -al, dir/a for Windows. Then what you'll see is this .git folder, right? And you'll also see this .vs folder and a bunch of other ones. These are the things you should be seeing here. Okay, cool. But on the command line, I want to run light-server like this, light-server. And what this is going to do is run a little server that you should see this happening. If you see this with light-server, you're with me. That's what we did last week. We just did a little hello world. We put it in a canvas. And we made it spin around. Yay! Lots of fun. All right. But we're really going to go forward a little faster today than the other day because we don't have a lot of time. Again, we're sitting at 2:15, and I've got basically an hour and 45 minutes to show you the next step. Right? It's not a lot of time, believe it or not, right? So what do I mean by that? Okay, let's go back to our code for a second. I'll leave this going. I'll let that go so you can see that over here. And what I'm going to try and do as much as possible is code here and then look over here to see the changes, right? All right, so let's say I talked about the task runner. Let's change this word. Instead of hello world, we'll say goodbye world, okay? Just to show you how it works. So goodbye world, all right? Goodbye world. I'm going to save. Now watch what happens. Because I'm watching and I got my task runner and I press Control-Shift-B, if I press save, it automatically transpiles. I got nothing else to do. And if I look at my game.js file now, which it transpiled to, you can see that it went to goodbye world. And automatically, now it says goodbye world. See? There's no checking different files and everything else. It just transpiles immediately into JavaScript, which is what we wanted. Okay? This saves us that extra step. Otherwise, we have a lot of, we could forget. Like what happens if you forget to transpile? I don't want that situation happening with you guys, right? It just automatically transpiles for you. That's what I want. Okay? All right, so we have that situation and we have our little code, but it's absolutely useless, right? This code, all it does is do this little hello world dance, and I don't care about that, right? All right, well, we need some visuals, and I need to talk about what I want to do. I'm going to get you to download another asset, okay? So let's download some assets. I'm going to go up online, up on Centennial College, right? If you look at Centennial College, and I want you to go, when it comes to repositories for Centennial College, I want you to search for MP assets. Now, for those people who have done that COMP397 course with me, I'm going to make you sick, because guess what? We're going to do MailPilot as a demo with JavaScript, which is way harder, right? So let's take a look at MP assets. Please download the assets from MP assets right here. If you notice, there's a few assets. All it is audio files, fonts, and sprites. That's what you're getting from MP assets. Okay? And I want to take these assets and I'm going to download them and install them on my project. So how do I do that? Well, I've already downloaded them. I just put them in the wrong folder. I'm going to go back and grab them. Yeah, it's here. And I'm going to put them back inside where they're supposed to be, which is in here. So let's say I downloaded them, and here we are, and I'm just going to populate them in here. Yay. Okay, here's my MP assets, right? So what I need to do is grab these files, right, the files that are in here, which is audio, fonts, and sprites in your operating system. Here they are. And here's my project files, right? And notice where it says assets. I have an assets folder. I want you to dump these audio, the folder audio, fonts, and sprites. I want you to download, take all this whole thing and dump it in there like this. So just drag and drop. So take this, right, and drag these inside your assets folder. Okay. Now mine, actually delete mine because I'm using a Mac, but yours will just copy. Right? Typically copy across like this. So now if I look at my Visual Studio project, here's my Visual Studio project, or Visual Studio Code, I have the assets available to me in my project folder. All right? So I've added my assets. Great. But Sprites is not a great name for a folder. Sprites is a great name if I'm using Unity, right? But images would be something better, right? So instead of sprites, please rename the folder. So right-click, rename, and change it inside of Visual Studio Code to lowercase images. In fact, let's rename everything fonts and audio to lowercase names, please. So rename fonts to audio. You can also change the sounds if you like. And fonts, also rename that to lowercase fonts. There we go. So images, audio, and fonts. We're good to go. You can see that it automatically changed them on in the operating system because Visual Studio Code is linked directly to the operating system. Great. Yes. You would go up on eCentennial, on GitHub. If you go to GitHub and if you go to Centennial College, right, then you want to search for MP assets, capital M, capital P assets in my repos. And you should find them there. Thank you for that. I didn't see your hand. You got them? Okay. All right, so this way you don't have to create any assets right now. All right, cool. So we got the assets. They're right here. And what I want to do now is instead of using a hello world, I want to make my plane appear in the middle of my screen. Okay? I want to make my plane appear. It's a little plane, and it's inside. It's a bitmap right now. And if you look at the assets in my assets folder, it's actually right here, plane.png. Okay? To make it easy, because I've added these 14 files, I'm going to go to GitHub, right? And I'm going to click plus on all the changes, and I'm going to say added MailPilot assets. MailPilot assets. Again, this is just my example. And I'm going to push this up to GitHub. So if you don't have them, you can always look at them up on the project template folder right now. Okay? All right, so what do I want to do? So let's take a look at this for a second. Let's review what I've got, because some people may not know JavaScript so good, right? Who is still struggling with the concepts of the iffy? I just have to give him the stink eye, like this. All right, sorry about that. Too much noise in the hallway. I couldn't even hear myself. All right, so this is the iffy right here. It starts like this. This is the top part. And for people who've had me, you know what it is. People who haven't had me, you need to understand what this is, right? An iffy is really a closure. Think about it as encapsulating your code, okay? So your variables aren't in the global namespace anymore once you put them inside this iffy. So this function, this little funky syntax here, where you have open bracket function and then open close bracket and then the curly brace, from the curly brace, from this curly brace, all the way down to the bottom, which is line 27, right? That is the closure, okay? So you can consider this almost like a class, almost, right? But not really. We'll talk about why in a second. So take a look. So we've got the stage, we've got canvas, we've got hello label. These are all in the iffy namespace, if you will, in this namespace that's encapsulated in this iffy, right? These files right here. By the way, I'm looking at the game.js file. Let's go to the game.ts file. They almost look identical, right? The game.ts file has not only the names of the variables, but also their type. That's the difference between JavaScript and TypeScript. We're allowed to put the types of the files next to them. And we showed you that last week when I went to the CreateJS namespace, right? And I showed you that it's the stage class that I was using, right? Now, I don't want this hello label anymore. This hello label was just for demonstration purposes. So let's get rid of it, all right? So it's gone. And that means this is gone. And that means all this is gone. Let's get rid of all this stuff, okay? Now, wouldn't it be grand? Here's a question for you. Instead of me making a label, what if I had to make 5 labels? I'd have to copy that label over and over again. And it'd be really unseemly. It'd be ugly for me to copy labels, right? Does that make sense? I don't want to copy labels anymore. I want to create a label class, all right? And if you know object-oriented programming, we want to create this label class. But how the heck do you create a class in JavaScript? Number one. And how do you split the class so it's not in the same file? Because making a class in the same file as another class is really ugly, right? So in TypeScript helps us with this, right? In TypeScript, if I'm going to go back up to Playgrounds with TypeScript, Notice here in the example, I've got my person class, right? But this person class, I can have another class in here. And look, I'm even doing something with it right here, which is kind of ugly. I don't want that. I want my person class to be encapsulated inside of a namespace. We're just going to use the module keyword to do that. So I'm going to go up here. And before here, just to show you what this looks like, before I actually code in my real file, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say module, right? And I'm going to call the module something. Let's say, for example, objects, right? And then anything inside these curly braces, right? Look what's happening on the right for a second, right? When I take this whole person class, I'm going to take this whole person class. I'm going to copy it or cut it. I'm going to put it inside the module closure. Now what do I get? What does it look like? An iffy. That's why I showed it to you, right? So I've got the module closure, right? I'm just going to see if I can type. Yeah, I can. Is actually an iffy. Now, guess what? I can't do this anymore. Look at the code hinting I'm getting. It looks like it is. I'm getting the. I don't know if you guys can see this, but it's a red line. Let me see if I can make it bigger for you so you see it. See, I'm getting these little red lines on the playground saying, I don't know what a person is because I can't find person. Why? Because my person class is encapsulated inside of the module, inside the iffy. So I need to expose the person class, right? I need to expose it so it can be outside of the module. And this is what you can do. You can expose anything you want to leave the module with the export keyword. So if I go to class, I can go export, right? And now if I do that, take a look, it actually returns the person class outside of the module. And now it's okay, right? But I can't access person anymore because it's not person. It's objects.person because I made the objects module. That's the namespace. It's just called module, but really it's a namespace. So if I go down here, I need to access this with objects.person. Right? And the same thing goes over here because I've created a namespace. This namespace, even though we're in the same file here, can work across multiple files, right? Which is exactly the situation. That's how we're going to do it. We're going to use multiple files to describe different classes that we're going to use to create objects, just like we would in C# or Java or any other language. And this creates almost this idea of us having the capability of creating an enterprise level web application, as opposed to just some web game that's in one big file that looks like spaghetti, right? Because JavaScript, unfortunately, for people who don't know JavaScript very well, is like a massive piece of spaghetti that just squiggles around all over the place, right? It's a function within a function within a function, or actually we call it sometimes function hell, right? Or callback hell. All right, so we don't want that. We want to go back into Visual Studio Code. Here it is. And I know this is the stuff I want to do, right? But it can't be in my core folder. My core folder is only for my core module, which is game.js right now, or game.ts. I need to create another folder, and that folder should match up with the namespace that I want to create called objects. So let's do that. So I'm going to right-click on my scripts. I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call the folder objects. If I can type. There we go. This is my objects folder. Yay! My objects folder is right here. Great. Now, what I want to do is I want to make a new object, and we're going to make that label again. Remember that label we made with a hello label? But we're going to make it a class that I can reuse over and over again. Okay? So how do I do that? I'm going to right-click on objects and make a new file. And the new file is going to be, instead of just hello label, that doesn't make any sense. Let's make a generic one. We're going to call it label.ts. Great. Label.ts got created. Guess what? As soon as I did that, bam, it got converted because I've got the task watcher going, right? It's already converted to a JS file. All right? And then, if you notice up here, I need to start with the module syntax. So I'm going to say module, objects, right? Here it is. This is exactly what I talked about before. And inside my module object, I'm going to export a class that I'm going to call label with a capital L, right? Here's my label class. And in my label class, right, I want to describe some constructors. I also want to describe, and I always start off with a little bit of commenting just to help me out, to organize my structure. And maybe some public properties, if I need any. I probably won't need any for this case, but I'm going to put them in there. You're going to see this structure every single time, as well as private instance variables, right? And maybe some private methods, if I need any. Yeah. I'm just all this is my structure, right? That's all I'm doing here. And maybe some public methods, if I need any. Okay? Does this make sense? So I've got, all I'm doing is, I'm kind of telling you how I'm going to structure my class. I haven't done any class work yet, okay? Let's make this work. So I got to think about what this is. As my label class, I can make a whole new label, right? But then how would I store it? I need to use inheritance in this particular case. Remember we talked about last time, I made a text object last time, right? A CreateJS text object. I don't want my label to be a new object that I'm creating from scratch. I wanted to extend the CreateJS text object to add functionality to it, all right? So let's do that. So beside class and where it says label, I want to extend, I'm going to use the extends keyword, right? CreateJS, here's my CreateJS. You should be able to find this if you've installed everything properly or are using my project. CreateJS.text. Now we have a different situation. My label is a text object. And now I can extend it and give it additional functionality. All right? This is something you guys have all seen before with me if you've done any kind of code with me. So now I'm going to declare my constructor. Right? And inside my constructor, I must call the superclasses constructor and pass in what it requires. Right? Super. In my super constructor, I must pass in text, the font, and the color. Right? Let's go back to this. So that means in my constructor, I need to take my text, font, and color. So let's do that. So I'm going to say I need the label string, right, which is of type string. I need the font, right, label font. I could just call it font too, right, which is of type string. And I need the color, which is of type string. Those are the three things I need. If I'm smart, though, I might want to break up my font into two parts. Size of the font and font family. It doesn't do that in CreateJS, but I want to fix it, right? So we'll say font size, right, which will be a string, and then font family, which is also a string. Let me show you what this looks like just to get rid of that. So this is what my constructor looks like so far. Is this foreign to anybody? Now, here's the thing. My superclass requires a text, a font, and a color. Okay? But my font should be together. That means my super constructor should look like this. Label string, I'm going to pass to my font, to my superclass. I'm going to pass my font, but I have two parts to it. So it's going to be font size, right? Plus a space, plus the font color, because that's what it needs. Or did I put color? Okay, thank you. Oh, actually that's wrong. It's plus font family. There we go. That's what I have to do. And then color. Okay, that makes sense? So all I'm doing is I'm just taking this together. Remember, because last time when we made this thing, I had 40 pixel space consolus. That's what I had in there. And that was all one big string. And now I'm taking that string and breaking it up. So I can have different font sizes if I want. All right? Okay, but so far, I haven't done anything special. I haven't done a damn thing special. It's exactly like a text object. There's nothing different other than I've split up my font. But wouldn't it be nice if I can tell the label where it's supposed to be? X and Y coordinates immediately, right? So that would be nice. So let's do that. So I'm going to say, well, I want my X coordinate, which is a number, right? And I want my Y coordinate, which is also a number. I'm not going to do it here, sorry. It's up here. Oops. Here. And let's just to make the constructor easier for you to see, I'm just going to break this over several lines. All right, not because you should do this, but because otherwise you won't be able to see it. It'll be too long, right? So I'm just going to break it up like this, just for our demonstration. So I'm going to put in x, which is a number. And by the way, this string, number, and all these things that I'm putting in here are the default JavaScript types. Even though JavaScript is loosely typed, it does have those basic variables, or the types. I have a number in JavaScript, I have a string, I have a Boolean, I have an any. Those are all things that are part of JavaScript, not part of TypeScript. TypeScript just defines them a little bit more strictly. It's like using strict mode in JavaScript. That's what it's doing. So this is one thing I'd like, X and Y, but wouldn't it be nice if I could also tell that it was centered? So my registration mark was in the center, not the top left corner, right? So I want to put that in there. So maybe is centered. So I'll say that. I'll say is centered, and which is a Boolean. So those are all the things in my constructor, which is different than what I had in my regular text object, right? Okay, cool. So label string, font size, font family, color, and now I don't have to put past in the rest of them because JavaScript, my text object, doesn't care about the rest of the stuff, right? It doesn't care about those things. But inside of my constructor, right, which is below my superclass call. So this is my superclass. This is calling the superclass's constructor. I'm calling the CreateJS.text constructor and passing in what it requires, right? Now the rest of the stuff, the X and the Y and the is centered components, that's something else. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to check to see if it's centered. And it's going to be like this. If is centered, if that's true, that I've chosen true or false, if I say it's centered, that means my registration values, my regex and my reg-y values, right, then will have to be centered. I'm going to use that whole registration value piece. So it's going to say, if it's true, then this dot regex, remember my registration values, that's the focus or the pivot point, if you will, on the x-axis, right, is equal to this dot get measured width. I'm using this because remember that this object is a text object, so I can use this referring to the object as a text object, times 0.5. And this dot reg y, right, is equal to this dot get measured height, right? Oh, not line height, measured height, times 0.5. So basically I'm taking half the height and half the width and making that the new registration point, if it's centered. If it's not, it'll be the top left corner. So I can have labels that are normal labels and labels that I'm going to use to center in the middle of my screen. Like, for example, start game or mail pilot. Welcome to mail pilot. It might be in the center of the screen, right? Cool. And then I need to put the x and y coordinates. I have to say something like this. Well, this dot x, because this has x and y coordinates, is equal to x. That comes from the constructor. I'm actually defining x and y in here, right? And this dot y is equal to y. So now I've defined a label that so far does nothing else, and all it does right now is a more complex text object, which is fine. That's what I want to show you. This is the first example of a piece of code that we're writing that's in the class. Okay, I've saved. Because I'm watching, I've got a task runner. I can see that if I go to my label.js file, this is the code. Now you can see the savings. I got this whole big extends method that simulates classical inheritance. That's what this does, right? As well as this entire closure with a lot of funky syntax that you're not going to have to know. See? Questions so far? Way easier is what I'm saying. Okay, but does this mean, here's my game.ts, does it mean that it's attached in any way to my files? Right now, we've already written the class, but the class is not attached to our application until we link it to my index.html. Remember, the index.html file right now, the simplest way is to add it to the index.html, because that way we're using it as a manifest, a way of linking all the files together. As of this recording, that's what we can do. We can't use Webpack, unfortunately. So if we look at this, you can see that this is my JavaScript section. I'm back into my index.html. And this is all the libraries. Here's my game.js. So logically, it should appear somewhere in between, like here. So we're going to make a new section called game scripts. I'll fix this in a second. I put an extra space in there. Game scripts, right? And under my game script section, inside my index.html, I'm going to make a reference to this new file that I made, right? So I'm going to say script source is equal to, now watch it, /scripts /objects, because it's in the objects folder, /label.js, because we don't care about TS. There is no TS support for browsers, but there is a JavaScript support, right? And save. So there's two parts to when we create a new file. We create a new file in the correct folder. That's step one. We use the module syntax, and anything we want to share from that module, we use the exports keyword. That's step two. Step three is we have to include it in the index.html, or else it won't be part of our application. Step four, we have to apply it and use it inside of our game.js or wherever we're using it. It looks like a lot of steps, but I'm just breaking it down for you. So let's go into our game.ts now for a second. I want to declare a new object in the top of my file here as a label. So I'm going to say, let's call it hello label again. Let hello label equal to what? Objects dot, and look, label comes up. Nice and beautiful, right? That's the thing that it is now. It's a label now. It's not just a CreateJS object anymore. It's a label that we defined, right? Down inside my main, let's try doing the same kind of thing with it. I'm going to say, well, hello label is equal to a new objects dot label. And what does it need? It needs these things, right? Label, blah, 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 right? Wouldn't it be nice, before I continue, wouldn't it be nice if I got even more code hinting than this? Because this is nice. It tells us what I need, but it doesn't tell me anything about this thing. Let's add some extra support. This can be done inside of the label.ts file. So in here, in my constructor, right, these are basic comments, but we can use a comment style, right, that looks like this. There is a module called document this that you can download, right, in the with Visual Studio Code. So if you look at document this, I want you to download it. What document list does is as soon as I put in /*, it detects all of the parameters of my module, class, method, whatever, and documents it immediately, right? Why does it do this? Because it tells me immediately what I need, and I can add in a beautiful little message. Now this did it automatically for me. It says creates an instance of label, which is true, right? But I can comment, I can add whatever comments I have here to provide additional support for any method that I write and for any object that I create from a class perspective. And if you ever create a wiki for your API that you're writing for your game, it will automatically create a web page. There's a way of converting your classes directly into a website that gives you complete documentation. That's why it's called document this. Amazing, amazing little piece of code, right? So that's why I recommend you do it. If you don't want to, I guess it's just your own choice, but I'm hoping that you will. All right, so this is what this does. So what does this do in terms of, how does this help us? Because this is like a lot of extra lines of code. It's not really code, it's all comments, right? But notice it has the @param syntax. And if you want to look at documentation syntax to follow, because you don't know what to do, you want to do it manually, there is, if I say documentation syntax, right, for JavaScript, right? There are several forms. JSDoc is one of them. So if I go to JSDoc, right, JSDoc gives us the kind of a syntax style guide that tells you how to get started with it and how to use it and everything else. You can see that it gives you add param and all that kind of stuff. Talks about the syntax here. It's really quite good if you want to know how to use it. But really, at the end of the day, it's quite intuitive in terms that if I put the at param, that's the parameter if you want to write this by yourself. The string, this part here is the type, and then the actual name of the variable, right? So it documents this part. Now it says member of label. I probably can take that out, right, if I really want to. So it's member of label, but I want to take it out. Right, so you can modify these as you will. And then when I go back to game.ts, right, I'm going to go over here, and if I scroll over, look what I get now. I get expect 7 arguments, but got 0. Here's the constructor, right? And it says on the bottom, my little message, which says creates an instance of label. This actually helps TypeScript give you more available code hinting, believe it or not. Take a look, right? Those question marks change into this is what I need, right? Okay, cool. So let's put them in here. Let's.
So what's the type of hello label?
Sorry?
What's the type of hello label?
The type is objects.label.
Okay.
Because remember, objects.label is objects is namespace we created. Label is the new class.
Yeah, no, I mean just
That's the type.
at the top where you define.
Objects.label. We can also make aliases for objects.label and just call it capital L label, but we'll do that later. All right, so let's go here, and what I want to do here needs 7 arguments. The first argument I need, right, is the name of the label, which is hello world, right? So hello world, right? Yay. The second argument I need, it goes to the second one. If you notice the code hinting, right, it highlights it with an underline. I need the font size. Well, I want 40 pixels. The third argument is the font family, which is Consolus. And the next argument is the color, which is some kind of black color. So 000000 in hexadecimal. The next is the x coordinate. I want to put it at the middle. 640 by 480, that's 320 pixels. So I'll say 320. And the next one is the y coordinate. 320 by 240, right? Instead of 480. And then is it centered or not? And of course it's true. It is centered because that's the one kind of label I want to make. And that ends my label definition in one line. Where before we had multiple lines, I don't have to do that anymore, right? One line is a purely nice label definition, right? And if I ever want to make other labels, I can do that now very easily, right? Much easier than if I wrote all those lines over and over again, over and over again. It would be too much work, right? Now this label is written, but it hasn't been added to the stage. Remember, the stage is the container that contains everything else in CreateJS. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into the stage object. So I'm going to say, hey, stage.addChild. That's the syntax. And I'm going to add in there hello label. Now, if I save, and if I did everything correctly, then I should be able to see inside this hello world. Because remember, I'm transpiling automatically, and I'm automatically browser syncing, right? So I can see the updates in the browser immediately, right? That's pretty cool. Okay, let's add that little spinning thing that we did before. Inside my function update, I want to put that back. So I'm going to say hello label dot rotation, because it has all the same methods and properties as a text object, because it is a text object. It's just our text object. It's more advanced than a CreateJS text object. So plus equals to 5, let's say. So now it's going to rotate after it transpiles and saves. And let's take it one step further. Let's make another label just to prove to you how easy it is. Let goodbye label, right, as also an objects.label. Here's inheritance, and here's you know, how classes work, objects, right? There's another object, and let's just go back here, just copy and paste, right? So we'll just copy here, and we'll paste down here. And instead of hello label, we'll call this goodbye label. Right? Here it is, goodbye label. And I'll just copy and paste this part right here, right? And make this into goodbye label. Goodbye, right? We'll put it in the exact same spot, but we'll spin it the other way around. So we'll say goodbye label minus equals to 5, right? Yeah, the rotation would be nice. Yeah, thank you. See, give me good code hinting. And we'll make the color, instead of making it black like this one, we'll make it red by adding 2 Fs here. Okay, span. And so what you have here in a few lines of code very quickly is this. Right, where I have two labels, totally centered, right, using the same exact code, the same class, right, and a few lines. And that's what I want to get you guys to. If you guys can get to this point, we're using objects, right, classical inheritance like structure in JavaScript. We're using TypeScript to do this, right? We're getting excellent code hinting, right, which we would never get in JavaScript, because no JavaScript gives us any code hinting whatsoever, right? We'd have to know the API, especially for Phaser. If you were going to use Phaser, you'd have to go and look it up. How do you do this? Set it up, and then you would know. And then once you created it, how are you going to modify it? It's really hard. Here, lots of power, right? All right, this is nice, but it's still quite boring, right? We've just done this thing. But let me put this up on GitHub for you so you have a copy. So you can do, if I was too fast, and chances are I was, right, that you can go through and check your code with mine. So I'm going to just kind of grab all this, and I'm going to say added label object. Okay, so I'm going to kind of put that in there, right? And I'm going to push it up to GitHub. I'm just using the controls here in Visual Studio Code to do that. Yes?
Can you please show the watcher one more time?
The watcher? Sure. Yeah, what's up on GitHub? Right? There we go. Did you guys join already? Did you guys join Slack? Both of you, all you guys? The new guys? Good, thank you. So if you look at Slack, there's a bunch of messages there. If you guys go through there, you'll see some stuff that I was working with. All right, so if I look at online, let's take a look at a Centennial College for a second. You can see that inside my my code at the top here, this is my project template. I got 7 commits now, right? And I've got my assets. I've also got under scripts 2 folders, other than the library folder, core and objects, and I'm going to start placing all my new objects inside my objects folder. Notice that I get 3 files just as a review from last week. Every time I transpile, I have my original TS file, plus my JavaScript file, plus a map file to help us troubleshoot. That's what we do here, right? So I've got these 3 files. So let me take a look one more time. Here's my label file that we made, right? Pretty straightforward. That's what the label file looks like. So this is just all comments, right? This is my constructor. We did a few things in the constructor, not much, by the way, right? And hold on a second. Look, this is my JavaScript file. Let's take a look at this insanity, right? Way harder to kind of comprehend, right? This part seems the same, but this part on the bottom and the top. So the bottom and the top of the JavaScript file looks really out of whack, right? It's like, what the heck? What is all this stuff, right? I know what it is. This part, this extends method, that's what this is, actually defines the way that TypeScript mimics classical inheritance, the ability for me to extend or inherit from, right? That's all it does. And it uses prototypal inheritance to do that. Okay, don't worry about the back end. I want you to close your eyes to this for a second and not worry about the real workings. Think about it as a magic spell, okay? And I'll tell you why. Because once you start going into it, we're going to be out of scope for this course. This course is not a JavaScript course. This course is a web game course. I need to structure it around JavaScript, but we need to get to the gaming part, right? So this is just the structure around this stuff, right? So that's why please close your eyes and just accept the fact that it works for me, and we'll move on. If you really are interested in how this works, I recommend you really study it well. I think it's great learnings, but we're just out of scope for this course. Okay, this is nice. One thing we're also missing, so I'm building up building blocks here. One thing I'm missing is a button. Okay, I want to make a button object next. And I know that I don't want to make a mistake that I made last time by making a bitmap, that's what a button will be, a bitmap object, right? And then make multiple bitmap objects one after the other. I don't want to do that. I want to create another object called button, which extends createjs.bitmap. Okay? We're going to use the same syntax, but I need your help. How do we do this? So here's my Visual Studio Code. Here's my code base, right? And I want to make it inside my objects folder. So what do I do first? First step, help me out. New what? A new file under objects, right? That I'm going to call button, right? Lowercase. And button.ts. When I create it, because I'm running my task runner, boom, it creates my 2 other files immediately. if you're running this properly. Okay? And the way to activate your task runner is Command-Shift-B. Yes?
The spider is not.
I'll have to go look at you, and when we take a break, I'll try and take a break very soon, okay?
So I guess it's because of version changes.
I got to take a look at it very soon, okay? So, button.ts. So that's the first part. Then, once I make my button.ts, what's the next step? I need to put it inside of a module, right? That's the next part. So module comes next. And the module keyword is going to be the same objects, right? Because I'm using the same namespace, right? And then I want to create a class. So I'm going to say something like class, the class keyword, the name of the new class, button, and then what? Extends, right? Extends what? We don't know. I told you we have a bitmap. And yes, it's true. CreateJS, right? CreateJS does have a bitmap class, right? So I'm extending CreateJS bitmap. Now, without knowing anything about CreateJS bitmap, we know we have the same structure involved. I know I'm going to have, let's just put some comments in here. I know I might have some private instance variables. I may have them, right? I may have them, right? I know, oops, we'll place pluses. I know I may have some public properties. I may have those. We don't know. But we're going to put the same syntax in there anyway, because this is good practice for you guys, right? And we know we might have some constructors, right? What was that? Not yet. I will put that in. Thank you for reminding me. But that's good that you remembered. I need to know some private methods. I may have some private methods. I probably won't, but I probably will have some of these, right? And I may have some public methods for some of these, right? So I know those things are there. I need to put the export keyword in front of the class, because if I don't, what's going to happen? It won't be exposed. It'll be locked inside of my module, right? You'll never see it. You can never access it. You must put the exports keyword here. And by the way, I don't have to make a class. I can use a method. I can create a static object. I can make a variable. I can do whatever I want in my module. It's just a namespace, right? So I can make a module a constant as an example, and I can expose by exporting all those constants out of the class, which I will. We'll do a config class that has all of my screen, how big my screen is. So I don't have to ever put in hard-coded values. I just go to that config file and put the hard-coded values in there, okay? So now that I have this structure, I know I want to put in my constructor. So let's put the constructor first, which I'm going to need to call my super constructor, right? But my super constructor needs a couple of things. It needs at least an image or URL string, some kind of URL string, right? Does that make sense? Because I'm making a button. It's a bitmap, right? My button's going to look like something, right? And I don't have that. I don't have right now, I don't have a button, right? I'm going to make a button. And I encourage you to use any software right now that you want to, or you can watch it. I'll put it up on GitHub and you can download it. But let's see how I can do this very simply. And by the way, for those people who've done it with me before, please bear with me. So there's a couple of programs I put up on Slack for you guys. So if you go to the Slack channel on 397, I mean, I've put up GIMP. That's a program you can download, right? It's the graphics manipulation files. It's free to download. I'm going to use Fireworks. But another really good one that I like a lot is Krita, right? Or Krita. Some people like that, right? It's very Photoshop-like, all right? It's a digital painting tool, and it's free. So you don't have to pay anything. It's great. That's another one. I'm going to use Fireworks because I feel comfortable with Fireworks, and I have it, and I pay for my Adobe Creative Cloud. So why not, right? So I'm going to call up Fireworks. So here's my Fireworks. Oh, if I can actually type Fireworks. There we go. And Fireworks is like just a, like I said, a light version of kind of like a Photoshop or a graphic manipulation tool. I'm going to make a new file, right? And notice that it's already preset. So I've already done this. 50 by 100. So it's 50 wide, 50 pixels width by 100 high. That's just not right. It should be 100 high, 100 wide by 50 high, right? Let's just make that. So let's say 100 wide by 50 high. And let's see if that works out for us. We'll make transparent background because we want to make a PNG so it fits on any background, not a white background, because otherwise it'll be like just a white box, right? And press OK. There's our little, oh, that's not wide enough. That's like a little button. Let's make it even wider than this, right? So we can modify the canvas to make it, let's say, 150 wide. There it is. That's our button. That's the size. And that's actual size. It's about 100% of the size. That's the size it's going to be in our screen. Okay. And again, you can make buttons whatever size you want. I'm going to just take a box, right? And I'm going to make the box. Don't worry about the box size. It may not be exact, but I will make it exact by putting 0, 0 here. Hi. Is it closed? Can you let her in? Yeah. And 150. We're just going to make it 150 by 50. Hi there. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you. Some of the iOS students, there we go, that are coming in. They need access to the Macs. Go ahead. So here's our button. So far it's white. That's really boring. Let's make it blue, right? Just to make it more interesting. So I'm going to pick a nice blue color. That's too blue. Let's make it a little lighter. That's a little better. This is our blue color. We'll give it a bit of a border. We'll make it a black border around it. Let's say, here it is. We'll make it a little bit of a, again, guys, you can do this with any program. We'll make it roundedness about 5%, just to make it a little bit more rounded. We'll make the border size about 3. Let's see if that's right. So a little bit of pixel art here. Maybe more. Maybe we'll make it so that it is 5. There we go. And we'll make it so that the border is 10, rounded 10%. A little nicer. There we go. All right, so cool. So we have this kind of, it didn't work actually. We'll make this kind of button. There we go. And I want to drag and drop a text object in here. And my text object is going to say, click me, right? I've chosen Consolus to match up with my text object, right? Now, I could embed my label into my button class, right? But for now, let's keep it simple. Okay, let's use a bitmap for this. But if you're really someone who's curious, you can say, wait a minute, Tom, I want to make my button and my button uses my label. You could. Or extend, the button extends the label. So here's my click me button. Yay, wonderful button, beautiful button. It's amazing, right? No, it's not. All right, and I'm going to save this button like this. See this click me button? I'm going to save it inside of my my object, and now push up to GitHub so you guys have it too, just to make it even, so put us on the same page. So I'm going to go to desktop, I'm going to go to project template, I'm going to go to assets, I'm going to go to images, I'm going to save this button as the click me button. Click me button. Okay, let's save it. I'm going to keep Fireworks open just in case I want to make other buttons. Okay? Yeah.
So instead of making different image file for each button,
I know what you're thinking. Make the image empty and put label on top of it.
yeah.
Yeah, wait. I agree with you, but I want to show everybody how to do the same things, right? But that's the way. That would be the best way. Then you wouldn't have to do another image. Just one image, and then you can just change the stuff inside, right? All right. So that's really cool. I've got that going, and I want to push this up to GitHub. So let's go back to my Visual Studio Code project, and eventually I'm going to push this up. This is incomplete, but for now I'm going to push it up on GitHub to get you guys used to it. So I'm going to kind of say added button image, or I'll say click me button. Click me button. And I'll go up to here, I'll add it, cancel, I'll add it to the staging area, add this one, go here, and push. You'll have my incomplete button class, and you'll have my asset if you go there and download it. Okay, alternatively, if you're too lazy to do that, that's okay. I like laziness too, right? I'll take my button, which I made on my desktop. Here's my desktop and my project template. I go to my assets, images. I'll take my click me button and I'll throw it into Slack. Like this. So one way or the other, you have my click me button. Here's Slack. Okay, so it's right here. Click me on Slack. All right. So it doesn't matter how you get it. Please get the button. All right, now that I have a button image, whether you go on Slack and get it, or whether you get it up on GitHub, it doesn't matter, right? But I have an image. Now, I haven't talked about preloading yet, and this is why this next section is going to take a little longer, right? So I'm going to take a break in a second, but first I'm going to complete the button, and then when we come back, I'm going to fix the button and make it more efficient. All right? I'm going slow, and you might say, but Tom, this is no game yet. I can build a game, but then you're going to be really upset with me, right? So this way you know the components I'm building. I'm using building blocks like Lego to build things up, build things up, build things up. So when you get to the game, you'll be confident as how I did it, right? Otherwise, you'll be lost, and you'll always be lost. You won't be able to recover. I'm telling you right now, it's too hard. All right, so I've put it up there. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code, right? And what I want to do here is I know I want to pass the image path to my button. So into my constructor, I'm going to ask for the image path. So I'm going to say image path, right? And it's going to be a string, right? I'm going to pass that into my super constructor, so image path, because that's all it needs. However, we also want to do the other trick we did, right? This is where Eddie comes back in my mind, and I'm thinking, I'm going to duplicate. Remember, don't repeat yourself? Well, guess what? I'm going to take all this stuff in there, too. I'm going to take my X and Y and is centered. I want to take all this stuff, too, right? Because I want to do the same thing for my label. I'm going to populate it into my button. So I'm going to go right here and go paste. In fact, I'm just going to split it across different lines just to be the same, right? So that the constructor in my label and my button look similar. So all I need is my image path, but I need my X and Y and is centered. Because remember, my button also has the default centering of the top left corner of the screen, or of the actual object, because all objects in CreateJS and on the canvas have a focal point or a pivot point on the top left corner of the object. Okay? And I want to give options for the user so that they can split the object in different ways. Okay, cool. So now that I have that, and I passed the image inside there, now is the next part. I'm going to say something like this. If is centered, it's a little bit different, okay? Because the button is a bitmap. It's not a text object, so that the method is different. And I'm going to say something like this. If is centered is true, if that's true, then this dot regex, right, very similar, is equal to this dot getBounds, right, dot width. See, a little different, right, times 0.5, right, and this dot reg_y then would be equal to this dot getBounds dot height. That's just another method times 0.5, and that's going to basically set the registration values for the pivot, right? And then down in here, I'm going to say this dot x is equal to x, and this dot y is equal to y, right? Because I get the x and y values up here. And really, in a nutshell, that's my butt class right now. We can extend that. However, I am missing a couple things, right? A button, this is just a bitmap, right? A button requires a couple of event handlers for it to work properly, right? One event handler for sure is the click event handler, right? The other one might be if I hover over the button, right? I need to do that. In order for me to have any kind of button events, I need to activate them in my stage, right? So I got to go back to my game class for 1 second, my game object. And if I scroll up to where it says stage, right, where I have my CreateJS.stage, I got to enable the button. So I'm going to go here to stage, and then I'm going to type in the word button or mouse. And I want to really do this enable mouse over stuff. That's what it's going to be. Enable mouse over is equal to true. And that would be nice, but actually what I want to enable mouse over and pass in a frequency number, how often I want to check. It's how many frames, how often do I want to check to see if I'm hovering over, which is 20. I don't want to check more than 20 frames per second because that's too much. And just FYI, if this is enabled in your stage, you already start to degrade performance, right? Right now, we're making this because our stage, in this particular case, is going to be just a stage for practicing. We're not making a game yet. In a game scenario, I would turn this off if I'm in game mode. If there's nothing to click in the game, Turn it off, because otherwise it's checking. In addition to doing the game loop, it also has its own internal game loop that's checking 20 frames per second. Please don't do that. All right, so my enable mouse over event is there. I've done that in just to prepare, and I'm going to go back to the button class to finish it. Okay, cool. So I've done this piece, but I have to add some private methods. Now, here's the private method. One of my private methods, right, is, and I'm going to label it as private, because here's something you can do in TypeScript. I can label my private method underscore, right, mouse over, right? So mouse over. And what does it do? I don't know yet. Let's just scaffold them out a little bit. And then private underscore mouse out, right, does something else. So mouse over and mouse out. When I hover over the mouse and come out of the mouse, right? I also need in my constructor some way of binding the events, right? And the way to do that is inside my constructor, underneath this X and Y coordinate stuff, I want to do something like this. I'm going to say this dot on. Now the reason why on works is because it's part of the CreateJS library. It's like add event listener, right? On mouse over, right? Then I want to call this dot underscore mouse over, right? Does that make sense? That's the event hand. So these are my event listeners. Event listeners, right? These are my event handlers down here. So let's do the other one for mouse out. This dot on mouse out, right? And then it's going to be this dot underscore mouse out, right? So I got mouse over and mouse out. Okay. So now every time I mouse over, it's going to call one of these two events. By the way, I also can tell CreateJS that not to return anything from these events. I can say, well, they return void, because they will return void. Event handlers don't return anything. I can also tell you that it's going to be a mouse event if I really want to be specific. So I can call this event object. I can make a new event object, and I want to call it that it is a CreateJS mouse event. I can specify what kind of event that it's going to take, and this is recommended only because that way I have access to the event object inside my mouse. All right, cool. So we don't know. Remember, this is for any button, right? So when I go over the mouse, I want the opacity of this object here to change. I want my opacity to change to, let's say, 70%. And when I go back out, I want to change back to 100%. So you can kind of get that hover effect. How does this look? When I'm over, I'm going to say this dot alpha, that's what it is, alpha, that's the opacity, is equal to 0.7. Change opacity, right, to 70%. That's what it is. And this dot alpha is equal to 1.0, which means this is going to change the opacity to 100%. So it's going to be fully opaque again. So when I'm over the mouse, it's going to be 70% opaque. When I'm outside of the mouse, it's going to change to 100% opaque again, right? Again, pretty straightforward stuff, right? It's just you have to know. So I've got a couple of methods. This is a little bit more of an advanced bitmap, yeah? It's not a bitmap anymore. It's truly starting to look like a button. Okay, I can't make the click event. Why can't I? Because the click event might be different every time. So it doesn't make sense for me to define it here in this class, right? It's a button, but you got to define the click event inside the calling method, right? That makes sense. Okay, so now that this is done and I saved it, I'm not quite done yet. Yes, thank you. I'm not quite done yet. What do I need to do now to attach this new class to my application? Say that again? I have to call it. Yeah, that's inside my game. But what's the other thing I need to do? It won't work yet. Yes. If you don't add it to my index at HTML, it'll never work, right? So that's the thing. We always have to remember that. So I have to do this. Label And then I'm just going to copy this thing here in the label and button, right? I'm sorry, guys. I know I'm being a little bit pedantic when I talk this way. But if I don't talk this way, you'll never understand why it doesn't work. So there's a bunch of steps, right? You need to create it outside, link it to your class here, button, right? And then call it inside your game.js, right? Which is inside of your core module. So here's my game.js. I got my hello label. Let's get rid of my goodbye label. It's just for show, right? And let's not let it spin anymore. So I don't want to spin anymore because that was just my example, so I can tell you how it works. So I don't need any of this stuff, right? I'm just going to get rid of it. So right now I only have stage, canvas, and hello label. Let's make the button, right? So I'm going to say let, and I'm going to call this the, hello, or I don't know, click button. We'll call it the click button. So that's where you named it. And then it'll be called, it's of type objects.button. Right? Because we made that a new class, right? Objects.button. Okay? And then I'm going to do the same thing down here in my main, right? Where I'm going to say my click button is equal to a new objects.button, right? And now I need the path for the object, right? Oh man, hey, we can get some good code hinting. Remember? By going back to the button class, I can go to the top where the constructor is, and I can do something like this, / to give me one of these. I can take this away. And this, what it does, it just gives me a little bit more. If I want to put some other commenting in here, I can talk about what this thing needs. I don't want to right now. I'm just showing you how to do it. Okay, so now if you notice, it gives me this. I need 4 arguments, but I got 0, right? What do I need here? The first one is the image path. Oh man, how the heck do I put the image path in this thing? Because it's inside of my assets images, right? So what is my path to that? Where am I sitting right now? I'm inside core. I got to go up one step inside scripts. I got to go up another step to the root of my application. So I got to go back 2 steps in my path, and then down into assets, down into images, and then click me button.ping. So that's what the path is going to be. So it's this. Oops. Right? So up 1, up 2, right? Down into assets, down into images, down into click me button.ping. And I'm going to take this away for a second. Okay, but I'm not done. What do I need to do next? What's next? I need, well, my number. So let's put it a little bit below my label. My label is at 320 by 240. Let's put it at around 340. So we'll say, so 240, so sorry, 320. It'll be still centered, but by 340. So 320 by 340. And we'll say that is centered is true. Does that make sense? So 320 is the middle of my screen. So X and horizontal. Then my label is here in the middle at 240. And now I'm putting my button below that at 340. So 100 pixels below that. Okay? And then I got to add it to the stage. Stage.addChild, right? And I'll call this the click me button. Or click button, whatever I called it. Okay, if I did everything right, and if I go back to this now, I should have, oh man, what the heck? What happened, right? It didn't work. Well, remember that you're always going to get this really cool stuff here. If I always go to inspect, right? Let's take a look of where my errors are. It tells you where the problem is, right? It says uncaught type error, cannot read property width of button.ts, right? The width of the button.ts. Why is that? Can anyone tell me why this is a problem? So if I refresh the screen, it's going to still tell me the same thing, right? So if I go here to button.ts23, right? Here's what I'm trying to do. Get bounds.width. Get bounds.width. And why is it having a problem finding my get bounds.width for my button? Yes? It's never been created yet, right? So this is the funky thing about making objects like this, right? So yes, we had a really great idea, right? And the great idea when we created our button class, right? Here's our button class up here. The great, amazing idea is that we want to measure the width of the button. But here's the problem, just like you said, right? The button hasn't been added yet. Why hasn't the button been added yet, my friends? Think about JavaScript. Think about HTML. What happens, really? The page loads, but the button hasn't had a chance to load from the operating system. My image is still never loaded, right? Now it tries to load the image, but it's too late. I've already tried to measure it. And because I'm trying to measure error, I'm getting an error. I'm not loading anything. The object does not exist yet. There is no image because I've already loaded my page. My page is already loaded. We're talking about web games, right? That means my page has to load, which means I have to use Ajax or some kind of way of preloading. Hey, preloading, right? That's why preload.js is there in the first bloody place, right? Let's get preload.js working. Do you guys need a break or should I continue? It's up to you.
If you can commit.
I will commit.
Nice, yeah.
Here's my commit. Thank you. And I'll say added button or button.js, button object. There we go. Push. Okay, it's committed. So can I continue or should I stop? What do you want me to do? Break? Okay. So let's take a short break, and when I come back, I'll continue with fixing the button.